Welcome to Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now you can learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property. Learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau with the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denisi, and Corker. He's a member of the Committee on Professional Ethics of the Bar Association of Nassau County and counsel to the Nassau Academy of Law. And now, here is your host for Law You Should Know, attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we're going to discuss understanding Medicare, and it's not just the people who are getting Medicare or have to sign up soon, but their friends, advisors, and children who should have an understanding of what the baby boomer population is going to have to deal with in the near future. Our guest is Danielle Kunkel, and she is involved in Medicare plans and helping people navigate the Medicare process. Danielle, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for having me.
First off, why don't we just tell our listeners about what exactly Medicare is, and then, of course, who it applies to?
You bet. So Medicare is a national health insurance program for people age 65 and older, and also for some people who are under 65 that qualify early due to a health condition or disability. And this program provides health insurance for we have currently almost 60 million people on Medicare, and then more that are under age 65. So it's a national health insurance program for that whole group of individuals.
And as the American population ages, it's going to go up.
Absolutely. 10,000 new people aging into Medicare every day.
And it's difficult enough for people to navigate the healthcare process in general, but there are different concerns when it comes to Medicare.
Yes, that's right. I often tell people, I think the reason it's so confusing is that your whole life you have employers who provide you insurance choices. Maybe you choose between two different plans that they offer you, but then when you turn 65, you get a handbook in the mail, and you're supposed to figure out 4 parts of Medicare, 10 standardized Medigap plans, and literally thousands of Medicare Advantage and Part D choices. So it can be so overwhelming when you're first aging in.
And even if you're not getting health coverage from your employer, perhaps you're getting it under someone else's plan, or maybe you're getting it through Obamacare.
Yes.
Medicare is the only game in town when it comes to 65.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point, because there are people on the Obamacare plans that don't realize that when Medicare comes along, you need to leave that Obamacare plan and transition into Medicare.
Now, this is true even if someone is, let's say, has children who are still covered by their employer or other plan?
Yes, that's right. So if you have, let's say you have an Obamacare plan and you have a family member on it with you. If that's the case, when you leave to go on Medicare, they will roll off onto their own Affordable Care Act policy. And then if you're working for an employer and you have group coverage, you'll have a choice to make. You might stay with that employer insurance because your spouse is under 65 and needs to be on the coverage for a few years. So you're not forced off of your employer insurance if you're still actively working. But there's a choice to be made there, and a lot of that depends on how much your coverage costs with your employer and whether or not you need to maintain it for your dependents.
Right, so the dependents' children are a big thing as well.
Yes.
So if you don't need Medicare for one of those reasons, do you still have to sign up or you opt out?
You can delay Medicare. So if you're still working for an employer, if that employer has more than 20 people, which is the case for most Americans, that coverage is going to be primary to Medicare. So you can delay enrolling into one or both parts of original Medicare, Parts A or B, until the time that you retire. And there isn't a penalty in that situation because you've maintained creditable coverage with that employer.
And so otherwise there's sort of a penalty for not signing up for Medicare?
Absolutely. So if you just didn't have any other insurance and you were pretty healthy and you didn't read the handbook and you didn't know that you were supposed to enroll, if a few years went by and it was time, now you decide to go enroll, you'll pay a 10% penalty per year for every year that you waited to enroll on your Part B premiums.
Okay, and just there's basically 4 parts to Medicare, so maybe you can briefly describe each.
Sure. So Part A is your inpatient hospital coverage, and I tell people to think of this as your room and board in the hospital. It's going to cover a semi-private room and 3 square meals a day and a nurse that comes around to visit you, and it also covers things like blood transfusions, skilled nursing, and hospice. But the hospital part of the Part A name is a little confusing for those of us that are not familiar with it, because some things that happen in the hospital actually fall under Part B, which is your outpatient medical. So things that are performed by a physician, such as surgeries, MRIs, diagnostic imaging, lab work, x-rays, those type of things, even if they happen in a hospital setting, will fall under Part B. And then, of course, ordinary things that you and I think of as outpatient, like primary care doctor visits, those things in addition, and preventive care fall under Part B as well.
And do some people do you have to take A and B?
If you don't have any other coverage, you definitely need both A and B, yes.
Okay, and if you have other coverage, you might want to just opt for one of them?
That's correct. So if you have the employer coverage, then you may decide to only enroll in Part A, because Part A for most people costs them nothing because they've paid taxes their whole working life for that inpatient hospital coverage. So there's not any real reason not to enroll in Part A if you have employer group coverage, unless you're contributing to a health savings account, which at that point the IRS doesn't want you to have any type of other coverage. But for most people, they'll have group coverage and they'll go ahead and enroll in Part A, and that can coordinate with your group insurance and might reduce some of your spending if you have a hospital stay. But since Part B has premiums, currently $134 a month for most new enrollees into Medicare, often people will delay that until they retire because their group coverage already has outpatient benefits.
So $134 is a relative bargain when you consider the cost of private insurance if you're self-paying it, and the cost of even Obamacare if you're not getting subsidized.
Absolutely, yeah, and it covers 80% of all your outpatient care, so it's really good coverage.
And what about Part C and Part D?
So Part C is what we call Medicare Advantage, and that's just one option. Usually when you have Medicare A and B, you're going to choose some type of optional supplemental coverage to help pay for the things that Medicare doesn't. So if you go in the hospital, there's a deductible, there's an outpatient deductible. I mentioned that Part B covers 80%. The other 20% is on you. So people will enroll in either a Medigap plan to pay for those costs, or they can opt into a Medicare Advantage plan, which is also called Part C of Medicare. And this is just how you get a private insurance company to deliver your Medicare Part A and B benefits. It works very similar to group insurance that you've had while you've been working. You have copays at the doctor, copays at the hospital. Some plans will include Part D drugs in them. And these plans have networks, though, so you're a lot more limited to the providers that you can see as opposed to original Medicare.
But if you cannot afford, a gap insurance and you don't have any other private insurance, it might be an affordable option to protect yourself from an expensive 20%.
Absolutely, because the Advantage plans all have an out-of-pocket maximum limit to protect you from spending beyond a certain amount, and original Medicare doesn't have that. So by opting into a Medicare Advantage plan, you provide yourself a catastrophic limit to your spending, even if you have a really bad year with lots of health spending.
And under Part A, are you still only getting reimbursed 80%, or they're footing the entire bill?
Part A will foot the entire bill after you pay. The deductible currently for Part A is $1,340, and if you spend even one night in the hospital, you'll definitely pay that. The downside to that is that if you are in the hospital and then you come out and you're out for more than 60 days and you go back into the hospital in the same year, you pay the deductible again. So you might pay that deductible a couple of times. However, once you pay that deductible, you don't owe anything else to the hospital for up to 60 days. And
so a Medigap or a Medicare Advantage plan would solve those problems?
Absolutely. Both of those would.
And what are some typical costs of the gap coverage?
It varies widely across the United States, but I can give you a couple of examples that we give. We do a New to Medicare webinar here for the public every 2 weeks, and so I've done a little research on the cost of plans in different areas of the country. So, for example, a female turning 65 here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, non-smoker, she might pay anywhere from $100 to $130 a month for a pretty good, comprehensive, almost full coverage plan. That same person, though, in Connecticut would spend twice as much for that same coverage. So depending on the area of the country and the cost of medical care in that area can greatly affect what the cost of a Medigap plan might be.
And with the Medigap plan, is there an annual enrollment, or do you have to sign up right at 65?
Your Medigap plan, you have a one-time open enrollment window, which is triggered by your Part B effective date. So when you turn 65 and enroll in Part B, or if you delay Part B because you're working and then you add it after you retire, whatever day that your Part B starts, you have 6 months from that date to enroll in any Medigap plan that you want with absolutely no underwriting. They cannot turn you down for any health questions, and you only get that window once. Thereafter, once that window is gone, in most states, if you want to change your Medigap plan or buy a new Medigap plan, then at that point you would have medical underwriting, and you could be turned down by a carrier if your health conditions are too much of a risk.
And they could also sort of reject you for genetic conditions?
It would have to be something in your medical record.
Okay.
So, like if you had a chronic condition like COPD or congestive heart failure, those are the type of things that would definitely cause a decline if you had failed to use your open enrollment window and now you have to go through underwriting.
So certainly if you have a chronic condition or you're afraid of getting one, you want to have a Medigap policy.
Yeah, you really do.
And the alternative, if you really could not afford it, I mean, is to enroll in some type of Medicare Advantage plan.
Yes, that's correct.
But once let's say you leave the Medicare Advantage for whatever reason, maybe you didn't like the choice of doctors, you still could only get the gap policy if you go through the underwriting. Yes,
and you bring up a great point because a lot of people don't understand this. They think people hear about the open enrollment period that happens every year in the fall, and they mistakenly think that that is a free window to get into a Medigap plan with no health questions. And actually, that window of time every year is about your drug plan. You can change your drug plan. It has nothing to do with Medigap plans. So if you're in an Advantage plan and later you leave it, you can get back to original Medicare, but there's no guarantee that a Medigap company is going to accept you if you have to answer yes to some of their health questions.
So that's a disadvantage. Once you sign up for a Medigap policy, a Medicare Advantage, you might be locking yourself into that approach.
Yes, and so you should never join a Medicare Advantage plan if it's not the coverage that you plan to keep for the long term. People will say, well, can I try the Advantage plan and then wait till I get sick and then switch to Medigap? And that's, of course, like buying homeowners insurance after the house is on fire. So it's important when you choose your coverage to choose a coverage that makes the most sense to you and think about if you have a year in the future where you're really sick and you have a lot of health care going on, are you going to be able to afford that plan during that time? And choose wisely in that regard.
Okay, and we'll talk more about those gap plans in a minute. We have to take a short break. We're talking with Danielle Kunkel. We're talking about understanding Medicare, and she's a Medicare insurance expert. You're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3, the voice of Nassau Community College. And you can hear us over the web at ncc.edu/WHPC. We'll be back in a moment.
This portion of programming on WHPC is brought to you on behalf of the Nassau County Bar Association, helping both the public and lawyers since 1899. They are the largest suburban bar association in the country. The Nassau County Bar Association offers clinics where you can meet privately with an attorney to prevent or solve legal problems involving Hurricane Sandy, foreclosure, wills, or elder law. Speakers on almost any legal topic are also available to schools or community groups. They can also help lawyers advance their legal careers and offer a place to network. Learn more about the Nassau County Bar Association by calling 516-747-4070 or visit nassaubar.org.
Once again, we continue with Law You Should Know. From the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denise, Corker, and Sauer, here is attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome back to Law You Should Know. We're talking about understanding Medicare, and our guest is Danielle Kunkel, and she's an expert on understanding Medicare. Danielle, before the break,